Happy New Year, and this is Justice for All. I'm George Yates, and we're here for the next couple of hours on this rainy, kind of overcast Saturday afternoon here in beautiful downtown Chesapeake, where we're broadcasting from, and we're going to have some fun here today. I have been actually promoting this show for the last couple of weeks because I've been kind of excited about having my guest on. He's the author of 400 Things That Cops Know, and he's Sergeant Adam Plantinga from the San Francisco Police Department, and he's the author of this great book. He's on the line with us from San Francisco today, and we are going to be talking about his book and what it's like to be a police officer in the line of duty. I don't think you can pick up the newspaper or turn on the TV over the last several weeks with all of the unrest that's occurred in Ferguson and the Gardner case in New York City and the police shooting in New York, this terrible tragedy. The whole idea of police departments around the country, the issues regarding the militarization of the police department. It seems that there's just a number of articles and discussions going on about the police. But meanwhile, you get someone like Sergeant Plantinga who writes a book about 400 Things Cops Know. And it gives you a whole new perspective on what our police officers are doing out there, both the men and women of our police departments in every city in this country are doing to keep us safe every single day. And he's here with us today. How you doing, Sergeant?
I'm doing well. Thanks for reading the book, and thanks for having me on the show. Well,
I'm really excited. The moment I picked up the book and read it, I just was fascinated by it. And anybody out there that's listening to the show should go get a copy. It's at Barnes & Noble. It's on Amazon. You can, of course, go to our website, and we'll also give you information on how to obtain the book. It's called 400 Things Cops Know by Sergeant Adam Plantinga, who spent about 7 years with the Milwaukee Police Department and then transferred to the San Francisco Police Department. And, first of all, let's just get started. How did you actually have a college degree in writing and became a police officer with a college degree? There's not that many cops out there with college degrees, I guess. And here you are writing a book. I'm fascinated by it. What got you started writing a book?
Well, and I think there's probably more cops now who have college degrees than maybe in years past. And some departments are actually requiring at least 60 college credits. So it seems like cops, generally speaking, are becoming more educated. But I got interested in writing the book just from being a writing major in college, and I thought that police work would be a profession where there'd be a lot of good stories, and I think I was right about that. And
well, you have a great section in your book about what it's like to be the college boy on the job. And you have to prove yourself. Did you find yourself was that an actual anecdote about yourself, having to be the college boy there and trying to prove that you weren't a softie?
Yeah, I think when you come into the job, people look at you and you have to sort of fight the stereotype that you are some sort of bookish softie, and that if push comes to shove, you can get in there and mix it up a little bit. So I think you do have to prove yourself a little more. And then once you do, then it's sort of business as usual.
I noticed that you did not have a chapter in your book on the 40 things that cops know about lawyers. And I thought that was kind of funny. We actually talked about this a little bit before the show. Did you not think about talking about lawyers? And that would mean defense lawyers and, DAs and everything else. So since you didn't write about that in the book, I want you to tell me, what are some things that cops know about lawyers?
Well, that's true. I didn't have a chapter on lawyers. My cousin, Victor Plantinga, is a defense attorney in Milwaukee. Great guy, great lawyer. Stood up for me in my wedding. So I think I'm maybe have a little softer spot in my heart for defense attorneys than maybe some cops do. But when you're a cop, you're investigating a case and you take it to the district attorney, and a lot of times the cases you bring to them they're sort of messes. Your victim may be intoxicated or sort of culpable in the offense, and you have some witnesses, but maybe they're not the most trustworthy. So you sort of put this big steaming mess on the district attorney's desk and ask to kind of do something with it, and it's their job to try to convince a jury of it. So sometimes cases you bring them, they don't have legs. So you have to sort of understand that that's part of the justice system.
When I was a prosecutor, I used to have my time in the duty. The way we did it was every week or every month. I can't remember. It was a cycle. And that you would have a duty day or a duty 3 days or whatever, and every case that came in that you screened was your case. So you would have a police officer would come in and it would bring it to you, and you'd have to authorize it for prosecution or decline it for prosecution or send it back out for further investigation. Is that how your experience has been when you take a case in to decide whether or not it's going to be prosecuted and for what?
We tend to have a couple of sort of standing DAs who will do the preliminary charging decisions. So you'll have people that you know, and so you can sort of joke about some of the cases you're bringing. I mean, some of them are some of them are slam dunks. You know, the suspect appeared to have done it, and there's witnesses and video. But other times, you know, they're excuse me, you may have sort of the victim who is maybe is a drug rip, or the victim's culpable in some way, or they were intoxicated, and you know, every case is going to have some sort of chinks in it. So you just understand that that's sort of part of the process.
Well, tell us, first of all, what are 18 things, your Chapter 2, 18 things cops know about the use of force. Tell our listeners out there what cops know about the use of force.
Well, I think that one of the things I hear a lot whenever I've been in a fight or I've responded to a scene where cops have struggled to take a violent suspect into custody is people will say things like, hey, why did it just take 4 cops to take that lone suspect into custody? And what we tend to say is, well, because there weren't 5 available. I mean, as police officers, we use tactics and training, but we're not superhuman. We don't have super strength. And a lot of times even one lone suspect, if they're resisting arrest, you know, you might need a cop on each limb. So actually the more cops, the better, because then you can take them in without some sort of long, drawn-out, protracted one-on-one fight. That's what you want to avoid. The more cops, the better chance you can take that person into custody without, you know, really hurting them or without getting hurt. That's
how often do you have to use force to take? I mean, on a percentage basis, do most people come quietly, or do you have to encourage them with a little physicality? You know,
it sort of depends. It depends on what assignment you have. If you're, say, working street crimes, which I did for a couple of years, you know, you're trying to arrest a violent felon, and they don't want to be arrested, so there may be a bit of a tussle there. But if you have a good partner with you, a lot of times they'll realize that the gig is kind of up, and there's nothing in it for them to resist. They're just going to maybe get knocked around a little bit, and they're just still going to go to jail. So, and a lot of times it's just, you know, if you have relationships with some of these people, even the criminals, they'll know that you're doing your job, so they'll go with the program.
You talk about the use of firearms, and that's really the story of the day. Seems like nationwide right now, some killings, both police officers being killed by firearms as well as some citizens. And you talk about that. What are some things that cops know about guns and shots being fired?
Well, when you get sent to a person with a gun call, that you get this adrenaline spike. You go in there, and you want to use sort of tactics and training. You don't want to roll right up to someone that you think might be armed. Distance is your friend. If you can get an engine block between you and the suspect, that's for the best. Excuse me, I got a little bit of a cough here, so I'm going to pound some water. But if you see someone with a firearm, you're trained to treat it as a real firearm. And you've had some real tragedies of late where especially young people have been in possession of airsoft guns and have been shot. And that's awful. But you don't have time as a cop to sort of go up and inspect the weapon and see if it's real or not. You have to assume it's real because you want to go home at the end of your shift alive.
Well, that's what I'm impressed by the fact that you do go home at the end of your shift alive, and that's what most police officers do, but so many don't. Tell me about if you've seen some fellow officers fall on the job, and what's that like as a police officer when one of your own is killed either in the line of duty by an intentional homicide or by an accident?
Well, it's about as bad as it gets. But I'll say this: I've lost far more friends and fellow cops to suicide than I have to homicide. I know maybe 6 people in my life that have committed suicide, and they've all been cops. The job, and it hasn't exclusively been the job, but there's something about the police job that can really sort of push people to the brink. So as cops, we really have to look out for each other.
You know, this book is, I can't say enough about it. And those of you listening need to get a copy. Everybody should read this book. It'll just give you a whole new appreciation for police and what they go through. Because you talk about how, as a police officer, you take on this job, and it seems in so many ways to be so thankless in many ways, because you say that you are really just nothing more than just a cog in a big machine, that if you don't show up one day, that someone else will just plug right in and do your job. What did you mean by that you're just a cog in a machine?
Well, you, especially if you're sort of on the patrol end, you have sort of set assignments and duties, and if you call in sick or you decide that you're going to quit, there's someone else wearing the same uniform and with the same training as you that they can just sort of plug in. So, in a sense, it's sort of business as usual. If you get more into sort of investigations or sort of a specialty detail like homicide or arson, that's not so much the case. But San Francisco Police Department has maybe 1,900 cops on it, so you get a lot of people that are sort of doing the same gig.
So you talked earlier about suicide. What do you think that this idea that once you now these are cops that retired that killed themselves?
Some retired and some still who are still active duty.
Had they just seen too much? Had it just been too much of a mental strain for them? Did you ever? What is the common theme, if any, that goes through that?
Well, I think some of the common themes that run through police suicides, and I'm by no means a subject matter expert. I'm just speaking sort of anecdotally here, but as a cop, you see a fair amount of misery and mayhem. You see people at sort of their worst, and that can do a number on you. Some of it is maybe untreated depression. The job with sort of shift work and working holidays and weekends can be hard on family life. So a lot of it's been sort of families that are coming unglued, in part because of the job. And I think for a lot of cops, you think, okay, I'm a police officer. I need to be tough. I don't need help. I help people. So I think as a profession, we tend to be slow to accept help, slow to acknowledge that we need it, and that can really hurt us.
It seems that you must suffer from some kind of post-traumatic stress disorder when you realize that every single day you got to go out, you're in constant danger, even from the most routine thing, a traffic stop, pull up in somebody's house. You mentioned in your book that even if it's a routine call into a neighborhood, you don't always pull up in front of the house. You pull up, in front of the house next door, let's say. This kind of constant danger, it wears on you after a while. You've been doing this 13 years, or almost 14 years now. And you see a little bit of that then? You think that it's just a constant wearing down over the years?
Well, I heard a couple of war veterans who had been in Iraq and Afghanistan say something pretty interesting recently. Police work isn't combat. Folks that are overseas, I can't say enough about their courage and bravery, and they know more about those kind of things than a lot of cops ever will. But they've said that combat situations are sort of finite. Maybe you do a 9-month tour or a year tour, and then you come back and you sort of try to reacclimate. But some of those same veterans who are also cops will say, in a sense, it can be tougher as a cop because now you're talking about 15, 20, 30 years of just sort of constant wariness, and treating every situation as a potential deadly one, and that does kind of take a toll after a while.
Yeah, I mean, it might not be you'll hear about the Iraq or Afghanistan veteran that sees the bodies blown up and so-called that sort of thing, and creating the stress disorder issue. But it seems like from what I see with police and the many years that you're going to be doing, sort of like death by 1,000 cuts, if you will. It's just so much always being on edge. And then you do talk in your book about what cops know about being around the dead. Tell us what it's like to be, because cops see lots of dead people, according to your book.
Yeah, you do. Whether it's a homicide or a suicide, you can get pretty numb to it. And where the problem sometimes comes up when you've been sent to a scene where there's a dead body, and it's maybe your fourth of the month. But obviously, for the loved ones of that person, it's very real and raw. And there have been situations where cops will say something maybe insensitive and not realize that voices carry, and that can really be harmful to the loved ones of that person. So you have to be very respectful in those kind of situations and realize that death carries a lot of weight, and you shouldn't treat it as routine.
But it's got to wear on the police that see it so often.
I think that certainly if it's someone that you know or had contact with, it's a lot harder. But in a sense, it's sort of part of the police experience. You can get pretty immune to death. It becomes sort of just part of the background of your job. You see so many dead bodies that, in a sense, it doesn't really strike you as all that unusual anymore. And maybe that's good. As an investigator, you need some objective distance between yourself and the situation, so you can, if you're investigating a crime, you can bring it to closure. So you don't do anyone any favors by becoming sort of too emotionally invested in a death scene.
If you've just joined us, I'm George Yates, and this is Justice for All, and we're here every Saturday afternoon from 2 to 4. And I'm here with Sergeant Adam Plantinga, and he's the author of, he's a police officer, a patrolman, a veteran patrolman from San Francisco, who's written a book, 400 Things That Cops Know. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And we've been discussing this, and we'll be here with Sergeant Plantinga for the next hour or so. What I want to ask you about perhaps some issues that might not be necessarily in your book, Sergeant, but are you a member of a union?
I am.
And what do you think about police unions? Are they good things for police? Because I notice that sometimes we say that the police unions maybe protect bad officers and that sort of thing, and maybe that's one reason why we've got some issues in these departments. And of course, in Wisconsin, there's been we know that the governor there, Scott Walker, was going after police unions for pay raises and all. Unions are good things, I think, for the most part, to protect workers. How do you feel about your police union? Do you think it's a good thing?
I'm a member of the San Francisco police union, and they're a solid bunch of folks. In terms of what the contract that they've helped negotiated and their ability to sort of protect officers, I hold them in very high regard. I do get that people sometimes look at police unions and say that they are protecting bad officers. But, truth be told, there's certainly officers out there who are doing wrong and who need to be fired. But one thing that a good police union will do is also protect officers from baseless citizen complaints, because you'll get a fair number of people who will make complaints against an officer that some are justified, but many are not. And it helps to have someone who's got some experience to kind of, sort of advocate for you, because as cops, sometimes you need that.
Well, what I got, your book talks about the code of silence that police have, and how if any police officer ever does go testify against another officer for something that he may have seen, that he's going to probably suffer some kind of a problem, maybe become a pariah in the department. Tell us about that code of silence amongst police. You talk about it in your book some, so let's go ahead and expound on that a little bit, and whether police are part of maybe part of that problem with that code of silence.
Yeah, the code of silence has been around for a while and will probably continue to be around. And it's the exact opposite of how it should be. The corrupt cop should fear the honest cop, not the other way around. But when you become a cop and you join that brotherhood and that sisterhood, you you get really close to the people that you work with. You're literally putting your life in their hands, and so if you see them step wrongly, your gut instinct, your first instinct isn't to immediately, go tell somebody on them. And most of that stuff has to do with sort of minor rule violations. But when you're talking about a cop actually breaking the law, someone's got to step forward, because they're forsaking that trust. But it's not as easy as it sounds. And there have been cops that have suffered that kind of retaliation for doing the right thing. But I would like to say this: in my almost 14 years on the job, when you think about sort of the big instances of police corruption, people planting evidence, people taking bribes, I've never seen that. I've never personally seen that, not once, not ever. Most cops are honest and decent in the ways that really count.
Well, and that's what's so fascinating to me, that we've got this a few isolated incidents around the country that get all this media attention, and you do mention in your book somewhere, I believe, that they don't. When police officers take violent criminals into custody, that just doesn't make the news. And you also mention in your book, which is, once again, required reading for anybody that is out there as a citizen, you talk about how some of these people on the street, they're bad people. They're cons, and they have trained. They've learned things like how to take a police officer's gun away. I mean, they train for these kinds of things. And so this is the kind of wariness that police officers have to have on the street every single day. And reading a book like this gives regular citizens and even criminal defense attorneys like myself a whole new appreciation. I've always had a great relationship with cops. I was a prosecutor, and I always respected the ones that I worked with. And then as a defense lawyer, I mean, I'll see him in court. I'll say things like, you keep working, I'll keep working. I'm kind of joking when I say it, but they're doing a tough job out there, and they're straight shooters. You mentioned this in your book, and we're going to go to a break here in just a minute. But the one thing that has struck me in the last 25 years since I've gone into private practice, is the level of training amongst police officers, as opposed to what it was 25, 30 years ago. You could come into court then, and officers did not have the level of training they've got now. There's, as you said earlier, more with college degrees, more with required college courses, and more training just on the job. You go through a lot of training, don't you, that they just didn't do 25 and 30 years ago.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, 25, 30 years ago, the academy was maybe 2 weeks, and then they tossed a badge and a gun at you and said, hey, kid, go get him.
And it showed. It showed when they walked into court. And when you're a defense lawyer, they would lose the cases in police court because they just didn't know how to testify. They didn't know how to present their case properly. Now you go in court, you see a police officer. They don't even need a prosecutor. They can go up there and make the case. They know the law better than some of the lawyers and the judges do.
Yeah, well, and for instance, in the San Francisco Police Department, part of the police academy training involves actually mock court, where you go up there and practice testifying, and you'll have sort of a mock case that you're speaking to, and yeah, all that stuff really helps. You don't want to just throw people to the wolves.
Yeah, it's really an amazing change, and also the atmosphere towards from the judges towards police has changed quite a bit as well. It used to be kind of a gotcha moment. I think that it seemed like judges would, if the police officer made a mistake, an untrained one, let's say, not properly prepared, and the judge would. Now, a judge will actually kind of step in and help a police officer. I think we've seen a much more pro-law enforcement judiciary than we had years ago as well.
Yeah, and I've seen some of that, although maybe generally speaking more in Milwaukee than in San Francisco.
Yeah, you've got that liberal judiciary in San Francisco, probably a little more than we have here in Virginia as well. But our judges will have a tendency sometimes to even allow officers to reopen a case, let's say, if they've failed to establish the case in in their case in chief. We're going to take a short break here. This is Justice for All. I'm George Yates, and we're scheduled to have a Sergeant Adam Plantinga to stay with us. So we'll be right back after these messages.
If finances are holding you back from enrolling your kids or grandkids in private Christian schools, call the radio station at 488-1010. We have a partnership program with several schools on the peninsula and the south side that allows us to offer a 35% discount off tuition for preschool through the 12th grade. Give us a call today at 488-1010 or visit our website at tuitionsolution.org. Did we mention we added daycares to the site? tuitionsolution.org.
RM Designs T-shirt printing and more is located in Smithfield, but serves all of Hampton Roads. They specialize in vinyl design shirts, apparel, window stickers, cups, and other specialty gifts. They also have rhinestone and embroidery designed apparel, and they offer Pandora-style beads and hardware to create a one-of-a-kind piece of jewelry. RM Designs T-shirt printing and more caters to businesses, sports teams, churches, groups, and family reunions. They also offer a great fundraising package should you be in need of money for a special project. And they also do home parties if you and your friends would like to get together and make your own creations. RM Designs T-shirt printing and more can be reached at 757-255-9140. That's 757-255-9140. Email them at rmdesigns11@aol.com or find them on Facebook at RM Twisted Designs. You can also place orders directly off their store at storeenvy.com/RM Twisted Designs.
Nor'easter season is here, so don't get all wet. Protect your house. Call Crawl Space Door Systems at 363-0005. Reduce your flood insurance, reduce the threat of mold and insects, and save energy. Crawl Space Doors, air vents, flood vents, vent covers, and fans can help you stay dry or get you dry quickly. Contact Crawl Space Doors for more information at 363-0005 or online at crawlspacedores.com. Stay dry, my friends.
Okay, we're back. It's George Yates with Justice for All, and we're here talking about 400 things that cops know. I got your chapter on juveniles was very illuminating. What do cops know about dealing with the juvenile criminal?
You know, it can be tough because there's a whole different set of rules as applies to juveniles, and that is, it should be. I mean, they should be treated like adults, but sometimes you, as a cop, you think, you know, the punishments for juveniles are a bit antiseptic, and you see kids commit a felony on Monday and they're committing another one on Friday, and you think, hey, what is going on here?
Well, you've got some anecdotes in your book about how the kid will be right out on the street again, whereas if it was a grown-up, they would probably be locked up or denied bond.
Right, and you know, you can't treat them the same, but it's just, you know, as a cop, I think one of your biggest frustrations is seeing sort of lost kids. I mean, if you get some time in the business, you'll start dealing with generations of criminal families. You arrest the father, and then, you know, 18 years later, you're arresting his son, and that's really frustrating. I mean, you see kids that are just, I mean, they're doomed because they're coming out of hopeless family situations. And, you know, you marvel at the few that make it. It's like fighting your way out of quicksand.
What's it like walking the streets of the hood, knowing just how dire some of these people's situation is?
You know, I think one of the things that helps is to, instead of just sort of bemoaning it, to do something about it. And I know on the San Francisco Police Department, we have police athletic leagues. We have programs where cops go into schools and read to kids. I was a Big Brother in the Big Brother, Big Sister program for about 6 years. It helps to sort of do something tangible where you feel like, you know, I guess the old saw is you feel like you're part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem. You got to do something. You can't just sort of sit away from a distance and complain.
Well, when you're walking the streets of and doing this neighborhood policing, do you run into a lot of people that don't like the police or don't respect the police or don't trust the police? And if so, how does that affect you when you're really just probably trying to help?
You do. You run into plenty of that, and so the irony is that some of the people that hate you the most live in the kinds of neighborhoods where they need you the most. And some people hate the police because there may have been an instance where the police legitimately did them wrong. I mean, maybe it was a questionable shooting, or maybe the cops said something very insensitive around them. That stuff happens. But I think more often than not, people tend to hate the police because we don't let them have their way. They may want to sit on the corner and deal drugs, and we say, no, I don't think so. Or we may arrest them when they want to drive a stolen car around. So you deal with some of those attitudes. But as a cop, there's things you can do. I mean, you try to have civil conversations with people whenever possible. Sometimes you can just sort of out-nice people. They're expecting you to sort of maybe give them a little lip, and instead you say something pleasant, and sometimes it kind of takes them off guard because they weren't expecting that.
Well, your book's funny. You've got a great sense of humor, and I'm sure you must use that on the street. In several parts of your book, you say things like, when people tell you that they hate the police, and you respond, well, I'm not too wild about cops either.
Right.
And you also say that if you're a cop, you don't put a bumper sticker on your car saying you're a cop. You don't advertise to the average person if you're out walking around the mall. You don't wear a San Francisco PD T-shirt or anything like that. Why is that?
That's for firefighters. Everyone loves the firefighters. I've run into people that I've arrested before when I'm off duty, and sometimes they recognize me and sometimes they don't. But you have a police bumper sticker on your car, and maybe some guy walking through the parking lot who's just had his 6th drunk driving conviction thinks, man, I hate the police, and then you come back and your windows are broken and your tires are slashed. So just try to avoid that kind of stuff. What's
it like being a police officer when you're off duty? Do you hang out with other cops? Do you hang out with regular people? Do your friends treat you? You're a police officer. You could arrest them if they broke the law. What's it like being a police officer, just in general terms, as opposed to a regular citizen?
Well, you tend to be pretty wary. You don't sort of turn the job off just because you take the uniform off. But I think a lot of cops tend to try to live in neighborhoods that are sort of pretty far away from the neighborhoods that they police. Because you want to have some distance there. You want to be able to try to relax a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I've got I tend to hang out with a pretty law-abiding bunch, so I haven't been in a lot of situations where I've had to sort of wrestle one of my friends to the ground for a violent felony. So far, so good on that.
Yeah. So it's easy. It's easy to hang out with non-cops.
It is, and I think it's sort of healthy too. I mean, I love cops. I have a lot of good friends who are cops, but I think it's good to mix it up a little bit. If you just exclusively hang out with cops when you are a cop, you tend to just kind of sit around and talk about how screwed up everything is. So,
well, you do mention that cops are constant complainers. I laughed out loud when I saw that part. Tell your average police officer. In fact, you say they complain. The only time you really worry about a cop is when they stop complaining. I think that's great. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I heard someone say not long ago that cops hate two things: the way things are and change. So it's just. I don't know. I think maybe it's part of the job that just you get a little bit bitter and sort of ornery. I don't know what it is exactly, but cops are chief complainers. It happens all the time.
Well, because you're not being called to go to some little kid's birthday party. You're being called to some domestic violence dispute, right? And husband and wife and drinking and. I mean, you're not being called to nice, wonderful things. You're being called to horrible things, and after a while, it has to kind of make you a little curmudgeonly, I guess, right?
I like that, curmudgeonly. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I mean, you deal with a lot of people at their worst. You deal with a lot of conflict and tension, and sometimes you'll get a call like a domestic violence where the call comes over that the husband beat up the wife, and you want to go in there and make that right and arrest the husband because domestic violence is serious. And as soon as you put the handcuffs on the husband, the wife is jumping on your back and pounding on you because she changed her mind. She doesn't want her husband to go to jail anymore. And you think, boy, this sucks.
Well, you mentioned you talk a lot about fighting, and you end up in a lot of fights as a police officer, right?
You do, but I think there's an important distinction to be drawn. Most of the time, when you're going hands-on with somebody, it's to control them and arrest them. And if they use force against you, a lot of times it's just to sort of facilitate their escape. They want to try to get away. So maybe they're sort of pushing at you or wrestling, but they're just trying to get away. They're not trying to necessarily hurt you. But then you have other times where you're going toe-to-toe with someone. They're not trying to get away. They're trying to hurt you or kill you. And those are, there aren't more dangerous people than that. And you have to, ratchet up your use of force accordingly to take them into custody.
And this is when having a good partner is really important.
Oh, it's so important. I think a lot of, maybe some of the critical instances that we've seen in the news lately could have turned out differently if the cop had a partner. If Officer Wilson had a partner, would that situation have unfolded the way it did? Maybe not. You get a good partner, hopefully someone with a little heft on them, maybe they eat a lot of corn, and I know I do. But you can really stop sort of violent encounters before they start, and that's what you want.
And you also talk about the use of a shotgun.
The shotgun is the absolute best. Sometimes all you have to do is rack in a round, and that sound, especially hardened criminals, they know that sound, and they fear it. They don't want anything to do with a shotgun. So sometimes that's sort of your peacekeeper right there.
Because that shotgun, it means certain death.
Yeah, you're not going to, you'll have a lot of people who may have gotten shot, and it may be sort of an in and out or a graze wound. There's no sort of in and out shotgun wounds. It's a devastating weapon.
And you mentioned you'll ratchet around into the chamber, even if you've already got around in the chamber, just for that sound.
Yeah, just for effect. Right.
Well, listen, the other thing that I get, you talk about this quite a bit in your book, and I think we're going to devote quite a bit of this show to this, to how you actually go about policing. And you talk a lot about profiling. And not necessarily racial profiling, but just, law enforcement profiling, criminal profiling. Tell us about that. Tell us about profiling and what it means to you.
Well, right, and again, I'm not talking about racial profiling. Racial profiling it's illegal, and it doesn't even make any sense, because some of the worst guys that I've arrested in my career have, been whiter than I am. But when you're a cop, and if you have some unobligated time, you spend a lot of time going from call to call, but if you have some free time, you're out there looking for criminals to arrest. I mean, that's what the taxpayer pays you to do. And you have a hierarchy. You're going for your violent felons first, and then you may be looking for people with warrants, maybe looking for drug dealers or people breaking into cars. And those people don't come to you. They don't just walk over to you and announce that they're criminals and turn themselves in. You have to go to them. You have to find them. And sometimes you'll know them by name. You know that John Doe has a felony warrant, so you'll grab them. But other times you're looking for opportunities to lawfully stop people who you think may be up to no good. And sometimes you use sort of smaller, obscure laws so you can detain them and ID them. So you're out there stopping people for riding their bike on the sidewalk. You're out there stopping people for littering. And it's not because you think riding a bike on the sidewalk and littering are showstoppers. It's just that you want to find out who this person is and who they're all about. And, if you think a guy's dirty, you want to explore his full arrest potential. That's how you do it.
And this way you take, because the chances, if this person's riding the bike on the sidewalk and breaking the law, he might be breaking other laws.
Right. I mean, some of the best arrests that you will ever make as a cop will stem from minor infractions.
And so I've noticed, and the Supreme Court of the United States has changed the the rules on this quite a bit. I know when I was at law school, it was a lot more. I mean, we still had the old Terry stop, right? The stop and frisk. And I know there's been a lot of controversy in New York City because Mayor de Blasio tried to go after the New York Police Department and tried to stop some of this, stop and frisk stuff on the street, thinking that it's been racially motivated and all that. But you're saying, wait a minute, no. Those stop and frisks are generally motivated by a police officer that sees someone that's up to no good, and they're going up there because they think this kid is up to no good or this person is up to no good, right? I mean, for the most part, that's what is happening. They're trying to take a violent criminal off the street. They're really not trying to go up there and just hassle an innocent citizen.
No, because there's nothing in that for you. It's just, you're not out there to hassle innocent citizens. But, there's a right way and a wrong way to do and stop and frisk. You don't want to treat everyone like they're John Dillinger. It can be a civil conversation.
Right.
And if it turns out that you stop someone who's riding his bike on the sidewalk and the guy's on his way to his law school class and he doesn't have a criminal record of any kind, then, the next time you see that guy riding his bike on the sidewalk, you're probably not going to be that interested in him. You may just say, hey, call him by name because now you know him. You're really out there trying to figure out who the bad guys are, and that's one of the ways that you do it.
You mentioned that when you see a car of, and I tell this to my clients too. If I've got a client, and I don't care if he's white or black, I say, you're driving while young. I think if you're somewhere between 18 and 25 years old, and you're driving down the street with three other your buddies in the car, males. You are going to be of interest to a police officer who sees you riding by. And I say, I'm driving by with my two kids in the car. I'm not going to be of any interest to that police officer. I might be committing a crime. Those four kids, 18 to 25, might not be. But the fact is, you're saying that the law of averages says that they're going to be the ones committing the crimes, and they're the ones that you're going to try to stop, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, statistically speaking, violent street crimes are committed by a certain age group, so you're going to be a lot more interested in, that car full of teenagers than you are in some, blue-haired lady who's looks like she's driving, on her way to church. I mean, it's you play the odds, and usually you're right.
I've got Joey on the line. He's a motorcycle dealer here. He's got a question of Sergeant Plantinga. One moment, please. Joey?
Hey, Joey Fletcher here.
What's your question, Joey?
I just wanted to ask Sargeant, what's the general consensus or his experience in profiling, which I understand is really just information gathering. But how do you look at motorcyclists? There's all different types of styles. You've got your young guys on sport bikes. You've got your doctors, lawyers on Harleys. You've got a little bit of everything. You have a very diverse group of riders out there. How do you go about identifying a motorcycle stop based on some kind of a hunch or profiling data? All
right. Well, Sergeant, are you there?
Yeah. You know what? I'm sorry. I did not hear that question.
Okay. Let me ask you. This was this fellow that called in is he's actually a motorcycle dealer here. He runs the Bayside Harley dealership over here in Portsmouth. So he's interested in whether or not the police ever profile motorcycle riders and what kind of, if in fact you're trying to make a stop for a motorcycle rider.
That's a good question. I think that generally speaking, if you're looking at motorcycle riders, I mean, we have a number of motorcycle gangs in the Bay Area. So if you see anyone that looks like they have, obviously you have the major ones like the Hells Angels, but you see someone with insignia on, and you know that it's a motorcycle gang, then, I mean, absolutely, they're basically, it's almost like they're wearing a bright red neon sign that says "I am a criminal." So
yeah, you talk about that quite a bit in your book. That if somebody is going out and dressed in the khakis and a polo shirt, they are not advertising that they are a criminal. When they come in with baggy pants and certain types of clothing, you say this person is advertising that they're likely to break the law. How do you go? Tell us a little bit about that. And once again, we call it's not profiling necessarily by race or ethnicity, is it? It's profiling by how this person dresses, how they look. But you do have a tendency also, you say, to want to go after young males more than you would after young females. So I know that's a lot of questions in one comment, but let's talk about profiling and getting the bad guys off the street.
Yeah. Well, you have to be careful with dress. You're never going to stop someone just because of the way they're dressed. But it all kind of goes into your computer as a factor for why you might be interested in someone. Because, say the last 20 drug dealers that you arrested all dressed the same way. They had the baggy hoodies, which helps them conceal dope, and they had pants with a lot of hidden pockets in it. When you see the 21st person who's wearing that exact same type of outfit, it's going to register on you. So that's going to become one of the things that you're thinking about when you decide whether to stop someone.
I would guess to answer Joey's question, the likely answer would be if you're two 50-year-old guys riding down the street with their regular leathers on, riding a couple of Harleys on a pretty sunny day, they're not going to be anybody that you're going to have any interest in. But if they're wearing gang colors and it looks like they've got tattoos on their necks and kind of look gnarly, then you're more likely to want to make them people of interest.
Right. And, I'd just like to say this to everyone out there who has a neck tattoo. I'm sorry, but I know that many of you are probably law-abiding, but as a street cop, the percentage of people you deal with who have neck tattoos, who are law-abiding, is pretty low.
Other than Prince Fielder, right?
Other than Prince Fielder, right. I mean, again, you're never going to stop someone just because they have a neck tattoo. But, again, it kind of just goes into your calculus when you decide who you're going to stop. It's a factor. You notice it.
Someone that decides to get a tattoo on their neck is more likely to commit crime than someone who does not make that decision.
There's anecdotal evidence that seems to roughly support that, at least in my experience.
Right.
It's not the last word of any of this stuff, but you just go from what you know.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever testified in court?
Yeah, I do. I do so, I don't know, on average, maybe once a month or so.
What do cops know about testifying in court and answering questions either from prosecutors or judges or defense lawyers? It's not in your book, but I'm curious.
Yeah, well, I think especially when you're new, a lawyer will ask you a question and you'll immediately answer it because you want to sort of get it out there. But you forget to wait for the fact that there might be an objection. So you want to just, let a question breathe for a couple seconds and see if it's objected to before you answer. But then, you're taught that it's best to sort of, when an attorney asks you a question, and if there's a jury, to speak directly to the jury, to sort of connect with them. That's sort of one of the things that we use. And other than that, you keep it simple. You tell the truth, and if you do make a mistake, you own it, and kind of go from there.
You mentioned that there's a million ways to stop somebody if they are a person or a group of interest when you're a street patrolman. And let me back up a little bit. Are you still a street patrolman? Is that your main job, getting out there, going onto your shift, jumping in the squad car and going out to the and responding to calls? Is that still your day-by-day job?
I have been doing that until recently. About a month or so ago, I was transferred to investigations. So now I wear slacks and a collared shirt, and I worry I'm getting a little soft.
So you're not wearing the uniform anymore. You're now in plain clothes.
Right. I just I do sort of felony follow-up investigations. Your robberies, burglaries, carjackings. But that could change in 6 months, so you can always kind of change things up. So.
And does that make you a detective then? When you go into investigations, does that change your title, or how do you do that in San Francisco?
It really depends on the department. San Francisco, the job is sergeant, so whether your investigations are on the street, you're still a sergeant. But it's, what I do in another jurisdiction would probably be called detective. It's that kind of work.
Right. We've got just a few minutes before the news break, but I got a question. Maybe it's more of a personal type question, or what you know about this. Are police you talk about this in your book? What makes somebody want to become a police officer? You give many reasons for it. Why did you want to? I know you said that it was why did you become a police officer? And are police for you personally? And are police officers? Do they have some kind of a hero complex? Do they feel like they need to rescue the world? Do you have some sort of a compulsion to rescue people, to help people? Is there something to that? Why people become cops?
That's a good question. For me personally, I grew up in a household that emphasized service. My dad was a minister. My mom was a school teacher, and so I wanted a service-related profession. And, growing up, I didn't care for bullies, and I thought that police work would just be a really engaging profession. I knew some cops and was interested in the stories they told, and it just piqued my interest.
Well, that answered my question. You don't like bullies. And so if you don't like bullies, it means that you became a police officer because you wanted to help people from being abused by other people. So, and that seems to me that, and that's very noble. I had a guest earlier this year on my show. His name is Cheney Mason. He's a defense lawyer, a criminal defense lawyer in Florida with probably over 300 jury trials, and he was the Casey Anthony defense lawyer, the famous case from Florida, the woman who supposedly killed her child. She was acquitted. Right. And I asked Cheney, he's in his 70s, and I said, why did you want to become a criminal defense lawyer, He says, well, I didn't like bullies. I never liked bullies. And so he became a defense lawyer because he was trying to defend people, I guess, thinking that perhaps the system was bullying them. So he has, for the same reason that you became a police officer, he became a defense, criminal defense lawyer. But my question along this, have you ever felt betrayed through, because when you're trying to help somebody and doing the right thing, let's say, and then have that person turn on you and betray you as a police officer?
I think any cop has had that kind of experience where you're trying to assist someone, and you're doing the best you can, and you come to what you think is a reasonable resolution, and then maybe 6 months down the road you get a citizen complaint, and it's something that doesn't really make any sense to you, and it may be completely fabricated, and you think, wait a second, I was doing due diligence there with this person. They were a victim. I assisted them the best I can, and now I'm getting a complaint. But I wouldn't say that that's the norm. You do get a number of people who seem to appreciate you, depending on the neighborhood you're in, and those thanks they go a long ways.
Well, that's great. Yeah, that's the old no good deed goes unpunished. Sometimes, occasionally, that it does come back to a backfire. We're going to go to a break here in just a little bit. Is that right? My engineer is telling me. Just got a couple of seconds left. And when we get back, I want to talk about how you make these stops on people that you think are of interest. Thank you. We'll be right back.